Alrighty, so this is for painting one. Clearly I'm in the painting prep room right now, and just wanted to talk with you all about a few things. Mostly the next project, which is going to involve making 6 panels on six Masonite panel paintings, which I'm going to show you in a couple minutes how to cut the Masonite and give you a few tips about how to get it ready for the painting part. And then the other part is taking the 2x2 wood that you have and creating a frame in the prep room here. I'll go through some of that on a second video. So I'm going to have 2 videos, one for the Masonite panels, one for the frame, which is going to create for you a 2x2 foot canvas. And just to explain the project a little bit more, so the 6 Masonite panels are intended to be the way that you're going to both explore some different kinds of abstraction, and I'll get a little more clear about the different methods of abstraction to use. 3 of the panels are going to be just pure painting. The other 3 panels are going to be using image transfers. So I'm going to talk about the kinds of images that will work for the transfers, and just my goals or intentions for how to use the image transfer to create something that's abstract. So yes, and then out of those 6 paintings, I think you're going to find that you have a favorite. Like something is going to kind of rise to the top, and you're going to say, okay, this is what I'm really excited about, this is the kind of process that I can imagine exploding it up onto my 2x2 foot canvas. So that's that's the reasoning behind doing these. And so they're going to happen at the same time. You're going to be working on the 6 panels at the same time that you're priming your canvas and you're starting to think about that larger painting, which means that you have to move kind of fast on the smaller paintings. So anyway, it's going to get a little bit awkward here because I've got my iPad on a stand right now. Everything's a little bit kind of rickety, but I wanted to show you where everything's located in the studio right now. So, of course, got our friend here, the saw. We've got the other tools on the table here that you're going to need to use for building the 2x2 canvas. And more importantly, on this table here, we've got a stack of Masonite strips. So these strips are cut 5 inches wide, and the whole thing is about 4 feet long. So I haven't done the math on this, but I think I know that there's 1 strip for everyone in the class. And what you're going to do is you're simply going to take the strip and you're going to cut it into, since it's 5 inches wide, you're going to make 5-inch by 5-inch squares, and you need 6 of them. So let me show you how to do that on the saw. This part is pretty easy, and one of the benefits of doing the Masonite first is it's going to get you a little bit more comfortable with the saw, I think. So here we go. All right, see, yeah, this is where it's going to get awkward. Hopefully my iPad doesn't fall out. I wanted to just show you over here on the this is called the fence. So the saw itself, the wooden part here that you put the wood that you're going to cut goes up against this, and it's called a fence. And I've drawn out a couple marks here at 4 inches, 5 inches, and 6 inches. So when it's time to use the saw, you can look for these. These are on the right side of the saw blade. So as you can see, I've got the Masonite here. I can move it out to 5 inches, like that. The Masonite is sitting flat on the surface, like this. And now I'll talk a little bit about, let's angle this down just a tad. I'll talk a little bit about what to, I'm going to move it out as well. Oh, perfect. Yes. Okay. So these are the things that you need to know about the saw and how to work it. If nothing is working, make sure that the saw is plugged in to the wall. That could be a problem. The next things that you need to know just about how to operate the saw. This will go down. So this big handle up here is what you use to push the saw down, and underneath here is a trigger. So see if we can get a better look at the trigger. So right under here is a trigger, and if I pull this, the saw comes on. Okay, so as long as your finger isn't on the trigger, you're going to be okay to see where the saw blade is going. So sometimes I like to put my hand on it like this and bring it down just to see where the blade is going to cut. Okay, so the other thing that you need to know about, I'm going to move this off to the side for a second, is the way that you angle the blade of the saw. You can see there's a plastic cover over this. It's kind of a protective cover. This will actually swivel up when the saw goes down to do the cutting. But here are the things that you need to know. At the bottom here, I'm going to move this over on this side, and there's a little red marker right here, and this tells you the angle of the blade. So right now, this is pointed at 0. 0 means that you're going to get a 90-degree cut. And the way that you make sure that everything is locked into place, it's like a two-part system. The first, there's a black handle here that you turn lefty loosen, so turn it counterclockwise to loosen it. You don't have to loosen it much, just a little bit. And then there's a button or a tab right here that you push down with your thumb, and then you can move this. So I'm just turning this on this wheel right here to change the angle if I want to change the angle. So when you're cutting your Masonite, you don't need to change the angle away from 0. You want it to just lock into place on the 0 mark. Let me move this back just a tad again here. So to lock it in place, you turn it to the right or clockwise, and it locks in place. Now, something that you need to know about this, I'm going to loosen it up again. I'm going to push down on this tab, and what happens is this saw has locks. So if I let the tab go and I push it, it'll lock into place at different places on the base. So it's locked in at 15 degrees, which there's no reason to ever use that setting. But there is a setting at 45 degrees over here, and so which also it's a positive lock. I think that's the name for this. So it will kind of find that 45-degree mark. It'll sort of lock itself somewhat, and then you just turn this to the right clockwise to actually lock it in place. This is what we're going to do. We're going to use the 45-degree angle when we cut the frame pieces for the stretcher. Okay, so I'm back at 0 degrees. Now I'm going to bring the panel out here to cut again. And so what I'm doing is I'm sliding this end out to where it says 5 inches here. There's a little mark there. And by the way, this doesn't need to be absolutely precise. If you decide for some reason that you want your these smaller pieces to be slightly off of a square, like 4 inches by 5 inches or something like that, that's perfectly fine. I think it would be convenient if the small painting matches the same proportions as the big painting. So if you're going to do that, then make your larger canvas to be something like, gosh, what would that be? 1 3/4 feet by 2 feet or something like that. I don't know what. My brain just isn't in math mode right now. So here we go. How to do this? I'm gonna put my hand. I'm gonna put my pinky kind of somewhat over the fence, over the back here, And I'm going to just kind of hold things steady, and I don't have to use a lot of force with this when we're cutting a thin panel like this, but I'm just going to have my fingers just kind of push down. So I'm pushing down on the top of the Masonite, and I'm just kind of holding everything in place with my pinky up here. I'm looking for safety goggles. Yeah. Got a few sets of safety goggles in here. So next thing is I want to make sure that I have my sleeves out of the way. So if you have loose clothing, make sure that you pull your sleeves up. You don't want any surprises with the blade catching anything. Now I'm going to bring the blade down here just to see where my fingers are. So notice there's a few inches before I get to the blade here. And so as long as you've got about 2 to 3 inches over here, you're going to be just fine. Your fingers are not going to slip. You know, there's no way they can slip into the blade this way, especially since I'm putting the pressure down on the panel down this way. So here we go. This is where the blade is going to cut. Now let's make the cut. Now notice I bring the blade down fairly fast. I'm not trying to like punch it through the wood. I'm not trying to go too fast, but I also don't want to go really slow. So I'm going to make another cut here at 5 inches. This is what slow looks like. That's a little too slow. The problem with that is when you move the blade really slow like that, it actually starts to a little bit burn the edge. It's especially true when you have a thicker piece of wood like what you'll have for the stretcher frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut a couple more here. So that's 3, 4, 5, and sure enough, we've got plenty of room. We actually have a few more left on this sheet. I'll save that for someone else. So now we've got our six panels that we're going to be working with. Now the next steps, oil, I would say that it's best to prime these, so paint it with house paint on the top. If you want to try working right on Masonite, it's okay to maybe try that with one painting, but in general I'll tell you, I think it's better to prime it. It'll be a little bit more predictable how the paint is going to act when it's primed, because what will happen when you put pure oil paint right on the surface here, at first everything's going to look great, and as you can see, it's not a white background, it's nice and dark, so sometimes this is kind of an attractive surface to work on, but I'll tell you that the paint will somewhat sink in terms of its luster, the gloss on top. So okay, I'm going to bring this up just a tad here and talk about what to do next. So on these panels, what you should do is take a piece of sandpaper. See, I wore my goggles. Take a piece of sandpaper, and you should sand the edge of the Masonite, because what will happen is if you don't do this and the edge of the Masonite stays nice and sharp, and by the way, you only have to do this on the surface that you're going to be painting, the face of it. The back side is not so important to sand those corners down. But the one thing that Masonite tends to do, and you've probably seen this on drawing boards before, is it tends to delaminate on the corners. I've got one here that kind of shows this pretty well. So you can see how that happens right on the edge. This is from dropping the panel. I think when I was cutting these, maybe this one was the place where it just dropped on the floor. And so that delaminating that's happening there, you can just sand that down and make it smooth, and it'll protect it from getting worse in the future. So back to the panel that I'm working on here. I think I lost it. I don't know which one I was working on. Yeah, I think it was this. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take a piece of sandpaper. We've got these sanding blocks, but I also just have regular sandpaper on. This is also sandpaper. No, it's not. I thought this was thin sandpaper, but it's not. Anyway, I'll have sandpaper for you guys. It'll either be out here or it'll be in the blue cabinet. So what you're going to do is you're just going to sand just the edges here. It's probably a good idea, by the way, to also somewhat lightly sand the corners. So I'm just sanding like this on the corner, just a little bit. Like I said, any place where there's a point or a really sharp edge is going to be a stress point for Masonite. It's going to be a little bit more likely to delaminate in the future, or if you bump your painting on something. Imagine you've already finished your painting and it drops and it lands on the corner. That's going to be a problem. So for finished paintings, I'm going to show you guys how to build a cradle on the back of these. I'm not going to do that right now, but after the paintings are done, I'm going to show you how to do that. So in the future, if you want to, say, submit it for like a student art show or something like that, you can just glue a piece of wood on the back, and then it'll hang on the wall. Whereas if it's just a piece of masonite like this, it's a little harder to hang it on the wall, just a little bit more awkward. You can actually use push pins, as you'll see, or you probably already know that. Okay, so that's how you get the surface of the masonite ready. The next step would be use house paint. So you can just sort of dust off the surface. By the way, one more thing. I always like to just lightly sand the surface of the masonite itself. This kind of masonite has a little bit of oil that is kind of like built in the process. Is it oil? Actually, I don't know exactly how they make this, but I know they take wood scraps and glue, and then under pressure they squash the whole thing together, and so you get this shiny surface. To me, it feels like maybe it's just a tiny bit oily, and the smooth surface sometimes a little bit resists the house paint or the primer, or in general might resist paint, and especially water-based paint. With oil paint, it won't resist it at all. But what I like to do is I just rough the surface up a little bit. I'm reminded, as I was talking about putting the frame on the back, which we're going to use wood glue to do that, I always rough up the surface before I put wood glue on the surface of masonite as well. So here everything's been just tiny bit sanded all over the top, and then these edges have been sanded as well. It's ready for house paint. So when it's time to prime, what you're going to do is get some paper towels and lay these out so that when you do the priming, paint doesn't get on the floor, it doesn't get on your drawing board or whatever. So you'll have to just find a place and a strategy for how to do this without getting paint everywhere. I've got a ladle. I've got a couple of ways that you can get the paint out of the bucket into a cup. You could use a coffee cup or something like that. Y'all know how to do the priming part. And so these, that's how you're going to take care of the 6. So the next video is going to be about how you cut the stretcher frame. So I think I'm good here.